Very good evening to all our viewers and welcome to this edition of The Complete Speech. I'm Joel Outskun. Well, the 58th annual general meeting of the National Chamber of Commerce took place in Colombo recently, and the event was gathered by several distinguished guests. Among those was Deputy Minister Harsha De Silva. Today on The Complete Speech, we take a look at the views expressed by Deputy Minister Harsha De Silva.
We all know that 2016 was a tumultuous year, both politically and in economic affairs. And to predict 2017 and beyond is going to be a very difficult task. I don't think even, what's his name, Sumana Dasa can predict what's going to happen in 2017. But what is visible is a nationalist feeling sweeping across many countries, significantly highlighted by the results of the UK referendum to leave the European Union and the US presidential election. It's quite possible several other nations also in Europe may go the same way, but we don't know. Now, with that is the unprecedented rise of China, both in economic spheres and I think more unprecedented in the political sphere, combined with the declines, and I reiterate, decline in global trade that have made forecasting what the potential outlook is going to be that much more difficult. So you see the canvas, what we are seeing is a nationalist kind of sentiment sweeping across most of the world, people closing up, and global trade also falling. Now in that context, these guys, bank who sit at their computers and read everything that comes out, they're the head of the global research team for Stand Chart, had picked out 4 points, major shifts to look for in 2017. The first one is the movement of the US-centric global play to a multipolar globe. So after the World War, we had the Russian and Americans, and of course after the USSR fell, it was only the Americans. Now what's happening is Americans are also not going to be the sole dominating force. It's going to be a multipolar world. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. And how do we understand it and apply ourselves to benefit from it? The second one is very interesting. From fact-based politics to post-truth politics. I'll come to that. The third one is from free trade to protectionism. And the fourth one, and this is also extremely important even for a small country like us, is from quantitative easing, or rather easy money, to what Trump calls fiscal stimulus. What does that mean for exchange rates? What does that mean for interest rates around the world? And as business people, as people who trade with the world, they're important to you. So I'll take a few minutes, if that is okay, to expand on these. Now, talking about moving from a US-based world order to a multipolar world, in contrast to Barack Obama, Donald Trump has a nationalist and a mercantilist view. Now, nationalist, we all understand. What is a nationalist view? What is a mercantilist view? Mercantilism was something that was around 500 years, 600 years ago. Right? You believe that the development is or wealth creation is a zero-sum game. That you pick wealth from somewhere and bring to your country. That is what the colonial masters did. Whether it is the Portuguese, we've seen it, or the Dutch, or the British. You know, they colonized countries, they took resources brought to their countries. And also they sold to these countries, but they put walls in imports. So this thing about increasing exports but say no to imports is also a mercantilist view. It's a mercantilist view, right? And what happened was, those days it was gold that they had to pay wire for exports, right? And so they shipped gold to the colonial masters. And then when there was not enough gold in the countries that they had occupied, they had to print money and inflation and all of that, taxes. And even America, the stories of the British rule, how it ended is interesting. Now, why I say that is because when criticizing Obama's what he called a globalist speech at the United Nations, then candidate Trump said he was running for the President of the United States and not the President of the world. So you try to understand the distinction here, that America is restricted to the 50 states and the 300 million people, and not the entire globe and all the inhabitants that occupy the land area. So this is a huge shift, a shift that you have not seen in our generation, because no US president, as far as modern history goes, whatever matters to us, had said this. So what we are going to see is a focus to reinforce US strength, both economic and military, through what we call in economics, economic autarky. Autarky means self-sufficiency. So this is going back to some of the experiments others have done in the past. Now, this will involve reducing America's provision of global public goods. Now think of a citizen of the United States who pays taxes, and with those taxes what they are saying is, look, we are spending it providing global public goods. What's a public good? Public good is something that is provided generally, I'm not going to go into the technical details of it, government to its people, for which you don't pay to use. Now a public good is safety and security. A public good is a toll-free road. Public good is free education. From the point of view of the US as being the global policeman, public good by and large was security for many countries around the world. It was the promotion of free trade. It was supporting and strengthening democracy around the world and funding to combat climate change. Now, if you spend $1.5 trillion to fight a war in some other country, or if you are spending billions and hundreds of billions of dollars every year to protect the Japanese and the Koreans, and is paid for by US taxpayer money, Donald Trump said, why should we do that? He said, let Japan fend for themselves, let Koreans fend for themselves. Now, does it mean that they become nuclear or not is another story. But he's saying, why should I? And that's also a mercantilist view, that what I give you, you must give me back, pay me back in cash.
More of the views expressed by Deputy Minister Harsha De Silva after this commercial break. Welcome back to the complete speech. Well, we were taking a look at the views expressed by Deputy Minister Harsha De Silva at the 58th Annual General Meeting of the National Chamber of Commerce. Let's get into more views expressed by the Deputy Minister.
Former Navy man, current ambassador to Sri Lanka from Germany is here. I don't know what his views are. You know, should America pay 70% to fund the NATO's activities? Should the other countries pay more? I mean, it resonates to the people in the Rust Belt in Ohio and Illinois and Kansas and Missouri. That while they don't have good schools, like he said, littered with old and shabby, broken industry, we are spending so much money overseas to protect these guys. I am not saying one is right or wrong. I'm just trying to tell you the facts so that you can make an educated assessment yourself. The second thing is promotion of free trade. They are saying by promoting free trade, what has happened to us? Jobs have gone to Mexico, they have gone to India, they have gone to Ireland, and we have no jobs. So should we continue to do that? Third thing is, I said, supporting rights and strengthening democracy. Was about, ensuring democracy. Human rights. Of course, there's this ongoing discussion. American-sponsored resolutions on Sri Lanka at Geneva. Human rights. You got to strengthen human rights. You got to strengthen democracy. Of course, we have to strengthen democracy. Of course, we have to strengthen human rights. Our government, particularly, came on that promise. Some people say, now you're going to be off the hook. What hook? There's no hook. It is our responsibility. Faizan represents the unity government. He belongs to the SLLP, I belong to the UNP. Why did we come together? To ensure that we do what is right. Two things. One, we had a professional military outfit. They fought a war and they did what they had to do within the rules. Two, there must be justice to people whose rights were violated, who were killed, who went missing, taken in white vans or otherwise. So there are two things. Now we have to deliver on those things. That is why we have co-sponsored a resolution in Geneva. It is not the Americans forced it on us. It is co-sponsored. That we will ensure that we will strengthen the rights of all people, of all Sri Lankans. And that is what we are trying to do. We may belong to different groups of different ethnic groups. Faiz is a Muslim, I'm a Sinhalese person. He goes to mosque, I go to temple. You go to church. But after all, we are all Sri Lankan people. If you are not able to live up to that, if we are not strong enough to accept that, then I think we're going to go back to where we started. Right? But that's beyond the point. But the whole point that I'm trying to make here is that the US, for a long period of time, took it upon themselves to go around the world and say, look, you have to do this, you have to do that, you need to improve human rights, you need to improve democracy and all that. So what Trump is saying is, to hell with all that. Why should I? What is in for me? Is there oil here or is there something else? So, US withdrawal of these key public goods will speed up the multipolar world that was already emerging. Other major powers will scramble to step in to fill the vacuum and need for major global and regional public goods. Right? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to explain that. But you see where opportunity exists, people will rush. Because there is in economics an disequilibrium. The weights are equal and you are in balance. Suddenly you remove the weights from one side, the other side is going to go down. So how are you going to rebalance it? So who's going to put the weight on that scale? And remember, it is no longer be a global scale. It's going to be regional scales. There is no global superpower now. Or won't be, at least in the foreseeable future. It will be a European scale. It will be an Asian scale. It'll be a Pacific scale. So already we are seeing people moving in to sort of fill that vacuum. President Xi Jinping in Davos has already signaled China will assume leadership in climate change. That's good. And ironically, also on free trade, that makes me laugh. But this is the new world that we are going to see. I said it makes me laugh. But everything is relative. So even though people may not take at face value what President Xi said in Davos about free trade, it sure looks to me that he's a greater believer of Adam Smith and David Ricardo than Donald Trump. And he also made reference to trade wars. He said, no one can win a trade war. I think it's just not a passing reference to Mr. Trump. I think it's a real threat. You want to start a trade war with me? I got the ammunition. I got the deep pockets to fund a trade war with you. So don't start one. But I think we will have to wait and see. So what are the opportunities for us? I think some very interesting opportunities are in the horizon. In the US-led world order, there were very rigid entry constraints, whether it is any sort of union. Now, for instance, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP that everybody was talking about, which is now dead, right? Conditionalities on environment, on governance, on labor rights and so on. And for countries like Sri Lanka, who find it very difficult to do the smallest piece of reform, really getting on TPP would have been a massive challenge. But in contrast, look at things like RCEP, which is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. What is that? That's ASEAN Plus. Those don't have the rigid entry constraints that groups like TPP have. So it does not mean that we need to do all kinds of reform before we enter a regional trade agreement. Now that is important to you, ladies and gentlemen, in the National Chamber, because there is a view that aligning ourselves or entering into agreements with others may not be a good thing. That we are opening doors for others to come in, but what we really want is for us to go out. A typical mercantilist view. And in order to do that, we have to meet conditionalities A, B, C, D, and E. Now in this new world order, what I'm trying to explain to you, it is important that you take this on board, is that the game has changed. Therefore, lots of different opportunities will avail themselves to us. It's for us to grab them. On the security side, what we see is a US-India relationship that will get built. I want to quote something from one of the campaign stops in New Jersey. Trump said, India is the world's largest democracy and it is a natural ally of the US. Under the Trump administration, we are going to become even better friends. In fact, I will take the word even out because we are going to be best friends. I look forward to working with Prime Minister Modi, who has been very energetic in reforming the economy and bureaucracy. Great man. I applaud him. So you see the alignment shifting. Now, in that shifting alignment, how do we plug ourselves into this equation? Who is India friends with in the region? Does India, or do they have the capabilities in providing the maritime security that is required? Already Prime Minister Wickremesinghe has stated our intention to promote an Indian Ocean Order that will ensure rules-based freedom of navigation and overflight across the Indian Ocean. Which means even though we are a small country with just 20 million people, we will have a hell of a lot of influence in this multipolar world to provide that maritime security, services, coordination in this part of the world.
Keep it locked with the complete speech. More of the views expressed by Deputy Minister Harsha De Silva after this short commercial break.
In this multipolar setup, some people think that US will be an isolationist country. It will practice isolationism or whatever it is that you call it. But that's not going to be the case, particularly in security related issues. Already there are signs of selective intervention. For example, the US may pursue a more aggressive policy in the Asia Pacific given Trump's early contact with Taiwan and the proposal by his Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to block Chinese access to artificial islands in the South China Sea. So it is unclear whether such threats will materialize. But according to Jeffrey Sachs, he says the US has two options. One is global cooperation, which Sachs himself says US is not willing to go by. Or the second is a burst of militarism in response to frustrated ambitions. So what he's saying is that there will be periodic bursts of US militarism in the region. But I'm just trying to paint a picture of what to expect. So I'll quickly skip the next one about facts-based politics to post-truth politics, other than to say, you know, it seems like that reality television is what Mr. Trump believes in. He looks like that managing a business is a simplistic task and slogans like "you're fired." And you know what he said about journalists a couple of days ago, that they were the most dishonest human beings on earth. And why did he say that? Because the journalist showed him photographs, aerial photographs of the 2009 inauguration and 2017 inauguration, and they said Barack Obama had more people at his inauguration. To which he replied this way: "You're the most dishonest human beings on earth. You should be ashamed of yourself." So this is quite ridiculous, right? Based on lies and just misconceptions, not misconceptions, just pure absolute fabrications. But unfortunately, Sri Lanka has long experienced this post-truth politics. You know, every time it's a Western conspiracy. Everything, something goes wrong. Oh, it's a Western conspiracy. I don't know whether you ever said any of those things, but now I think it will be more like it's a Chinese conspiracy or something like that. Now to get to the last point, from free trade to protectionism, and this is important. I don't know how many of you knew that global growth in trade has seriously slowed down. To give you an example, between 1985 and 2007, the growth rate of global trade was double that of global GDP. So countries grow, but trades among countries grow as twice as that. And just to give you a little example, it has drastically reduced since 2012. The slowest it had been in 2015. Growth in global trade was expected to be only 2.8% in 2016, and by the middle of 2016 the World Trade Organization revised those figures from the lowest of 15 years of 2.8% to 1.7% for 2016. So 2017 they say it might be even less. And with Trump closing borders, people who are in the logistics business or freight forwarding or in the shipping business already have seen repercussions. How big shipping companies have gone bankrupt or they are merging because they can't survive. And you think about lower trade with America. You think about less of stuff going from China and Africa and Asia to America. What will happen to the global maritime logistics business? But of course, let me tell you something else. Now, who are these people who Trump is going to serve? They are the people, not people who live in New York City, not people who live in Los Angeles. They are people who live in Middle America. Now, those guys drive a truck and go to the Walmart. Anybody who's been to Middle America has seen these huge hypermarts where they come in their huge pickup trucks and they buy huge things and they load them into their pickup truck and they take it away. Now, where does stuff come to Walmart? Stuff comes to Walmart from China and from Mexico and from India. And that is why they can sell it at $2.99 as opposed to $8.99. So when they ask Trump, Mr. Trump, now if you become president, you are threatening to put a 45% tax on Chinese imports and a 35% tax on Mexican imports. How will people buy? Things are going to be more expensive. You know what he said? Somebody want to take a wild guess? What did he say? He said, you know, I saw a lady the other day at Walmart and she bought 5 dolls for her kids. Why does she need 5 dolls? She could have just bought 2 dolls. It's a hell of a how do you do? So that is his reply to the question. Because it will be more expensive, so buy less. Americans are not used to buying less. They're used to buying more always. So try to change the American way and say, go on a budget, buy less. I think this is going to crash and burn, but that's my opinion.
Well, there you go. You heard the views expressed by the Deputy Minister, Harsha De Silva, at the 58th Annual General Meeting of the National Chamber of Commerce. Well, we will see you again in 2 weeks' time for another edition of The Complete Speech, and you could catch us on Facebook and YouTube. That is by simply typing www.newsfirst.lk. See you again. Take care. Good night.